Hi, I'm Kirsty Harris. I'm a chartered physiotherapist and welcome to my YouTube channel. So every week I'm going to be sharing new videos which gives you a better understanding of knee pain, helps you recover with confidence and helps you get back to doing the things that you enjoy. So if that sounds like something you might be interested in, I'd love you to subscribe to the channel. But for now, let's have a look at this week's topic. One of the most common questions I hear in clinic is, why does my knee actually hurt? So you might have been told that you've got arthritis or a meniscal tear or wear and tear changes, but what does that actually mean? So in this video, I'm going to be explaining what pain actually is, why a MRI or an X-ray doesn't always tell the full story, and why understanding pain can actually change how you think about your knee and how you think about your recovery. So let's get started. Welcome to this presentation on understanding knee pain and, more importantly, understanding what it means for you and your recovery. If you've been living with knee pain for a while, you've probably asked yourself questions like, why does my knee still hurt? Am I making it worse every time it hurts? Does this mean my knee's wearing out? Or is there something else going on? And if those questions sound familiar, you're absolutely not alone. They're some of the most common questions I hear from people with persistent knee pain. By the end of the presentation, I'm hoping that you'll understand whether pain always means you're causing damage, why being told having wear and tear isn't always the full story, why pain doesn't necessarily mean your knee's getting worse, what actually can influence the pain that you feel, and how understanding pain can help you recover with greater confidence. Pain is something that affects almost everybody at some point, yet it's one of the most misunderstood experiences in healthcare. Many people understandably feel worried when they're told they've got arthritis, degeneration, or wear and tear. And whilst those findings can be really important, they don't always explain why you're experiencing pain or how much pain you should expect to feel. Modern pain science has transformed our understanding of pain. It shows us that pain is far more complex than simply a sign of damage. And understanding pain can be a real turning point in rehabilitation. Before we explore what pain actually is and how it works, let's first answer an important question. Why does understanding pain matter in the first place, and how could it actually help your recovery? Let's start with a really simple question. Why are we spending time talking about pain at all? After all, you're here because your knee hurts. You probably want to know what's wrong with it, what you can do to help it, and how you can get back to doing the things you enjoy. So why begin with talking about pain? It's because the way we understand pain influences the way we respond to it. So many of us have grown up believing that pain always means damage. So if our knee hurts more than usual, it's completely understandable to think, if my knee hurts this much, it must be getting worse. Or maybe you found yourself avoiding walking, stairs, exercise because you're worried that you'll make things worse. Those thoughts are incredibly common, but they're often based on beliefs about pain that we now know don't tell the whole story. Over the last few decades, research has transformed our understanding of pain. We've learned that pain is much more complex than simply being a measure of damage, and understanding that can completely change the way you approach your recovery. Understanding pain won't change your knee overnight, but it can change the way you interpret your symptoms, the confidence you have in your recovery, and the decisions you make every day. And for many people, that's exactly where recovery begins. Most of us have been told that pain is caused by damage, things like degeneration, cartilage wearing out, or joints breaking down. And yes, those things can show up on an X-ray or an MRI scan, but they're not always the reason that you feel pain. In fact, one of the most important things we've learned from modern research is that the amount of change we see on an X-ray or an MRI scan doesn't necessarily match the amount of pain someone experiences. It's actually really common for two people to have very similar findings on an X-ray or an MRI scan, yet have completely different experiences. One person can have very little pain and carry on with normal activities, whilst another person with almost identical scan findings may have significant pain that affects walking, sleep, activities, and their general quality of life. So while scans can give us really valuable information about what's happening inside the knee, they don't always tell us why someone's experiencing pain and how much pain they experience. Unfortunately, when people hear phrases like your knee's bone on bone, your cartilage is worn away, or it's just wear and tear, it's completely understandable to become worried. Those messages can make us afraid to move. We lose confidence in the knee, and we avoid activities or exercises because we're worried about making things worse. The good news is that the story is much more hopeful than that. Pain isn't simply a measure of damage, and understanding that is the first step towards understanding what pain really is. So what is pain really? A lot of people assume that pain always means that something is damaged, that it's your body's way of saying something is broken. Modern science tells us something far more accurate and far more empowering. Now, this doesn't mean that there's nothing wrong with your knee. Many people with persistent knee pain do have structural changes such as arthritis, cartilage wear, or meniscal degeneration. Those changes are real and they're an important part of the picture. However, what we've learned is that the amount of pain you feel doesn't always reflect the amount of structural change inside your knee. In other words, more pain doesn't necessarily mean that more damage is occurring. Pain is not a direct measure of injury. Instead, it's your brain's way of protecting you. It's a warning signal, like an alarm system designed to alert you of potential danger. And that's really important. It's potential danger. It's not guaranteed damage. Sometimes your brain will sound the alarm even if there's no new damage occurring. Tissues may be irritated but not harmed. It may be that you're more stressed, you're not sleeping well, or that you're worried about movement, and your brain has become more protective as a result. A helpful metaphor here is a smoke alarm. It's designed to warn you of fire, but sometimes it goes off simply because your toast is burning. The alarm's real, it's doing exactly what it's designed to do, but it doesn't always mean there's a dangerous fire. Pain can work in a really similar way. The pain you feel is absolutely real, but it doesn't always mean you're causing further damage to your knee or that your condition is getting worse. Understanding this is a really big deal. It helps to shift pain from something fearful and mysterious to something your body is doing for you, not to you. And that can change how you move, how you think, and ultimately how you recover. Sometimes pain doesn't go away when we expect it to. It may be that an injury is healed, but the pain continues. This can feel really frustrating or confusing, or even quite scary, especially if you're told that there's nothing wrong. But here's what we now understand. Sometimes the nervous system itself becomes sensitive or protective. That means it starts sending out protective signals more easily, even when the original problem is settled. It's like your body's alarm systems become overprotective. The volume dial has been turned up. Your brain may begin responding to normal activities like walking, climbing stairs, or bending over with a much stronger pain signal than is actually needed. Importantly, this doesn't mean your knee is continuing to become damaged. It means your nervous system has become very good at protecting you, sometimes a little too good. For some people, particularly when the nervous system has become very sensitive, medications that work on the nervous system may sometimes be recommended. So we'll look at those in more detail in the medications module. The really good news is that just as a nervous system becomes oversensitized, it can also become less sensitive again. With the right education, the right rehab program, and gradually rebuilding confidence in movement, your nervous system can learn that it's safe again. As that happens, the volume can begin to turn back down and pain can begin to ease. One of the most important things you can learn during recovery is that hurt does not always mean harm. Pain is uncomfortable and it's your body's way of saying, pay attention. But as we've already discussed, it's not always a sign that you're causing damage to your knee. If your knee hurts when you walk or climb upstairs or stand from a chair, it's completely understandable to worry that you're making it worse. But if we remember what we've learned so far, we know that's not always the case. We know that pain doesn't always reflect the amount of damage inside the knee. We know that your nervous system can become overprotective, and we know that more pain doesn't necessarily mean more damage. So rather than thinking of pain as a stop sign, it's often more helpful to think of it as a bit of a traffic light system. Sometimes it's telling you it's safe to keep moving. Sometimes it's asking you to slow down, adapt what you're doing, or give your body a little more time. And occasionally it tells you it's time to stop, reassess, and decide on the best way forward. The important thing is learning to understand what your pain is telling you, rather than automatically assuming that every painful movement is causing harm. For a lot of people, this is the point where confidence starts to return. Instead of avoiding movement through fear, we begin moving again in a gradual, controlled, and sensible way. Movement is one of the most powerful ways of helping your nervous system to relearn that everyday movements and activities are safe. So start gently, build up gradually, let pain guide your pace, but not act as a stop sign. Every positive movement experience helps rebuild confidence in your knee. And over time, your brain and your nervous system begin to learn that these movements are safe, the protective response starts to settle, and for many people, pain begins to reduce. So far, we've learned that pain doesn't always reflect the amount of damage in your knee and that your nervous system can become more protective than it needs to be. But that often leads to another question. Why does my knee feel so different from one day to the next? You might have noticed that some mornings your knee feels surprisingly good, and then on other days it's much more painful, even though you don't really feel that you've done anything differently. And that's because your knee is just one part of the picture. This way of understanding knee pain is known as the biopsychosocial model of pain. It sounds complicated, but it's actually a really simple idea. It recognises that pain is influenced by much more than what's happening inside the joint. Obviously, what's happening inside your knee does matter. Things like inflammation, arthritis, previous injuries all play a role, but they're only one piece of the puzzle. Your thoughts and emotions matter as well. If you've had poor experience in the past, you're worried about damaging your knee, or you've been told frightening things like your knee's bone on bone, your brain naturally becomes more protective. That extra protection can increase the amount of pain you feel. Your daily habits is another important part of the puzzle. How much you've been moving, how well you've been sleeping, whether you've been sitting for long periods, or even suddenly doing much more than usual can all influence how your knee feels. Finally, your wider life and environment also play a role. Stress at work, family pressures, feeling low, poor sleep, or not having enough support can all make your nervous system more sensitive and turn up the volume of pain. I'll often ask people to think of pain like a recipe rather than a single ingredient. Your knee is definitely one ingredient, your sleep is another, stress is another, movement is another, your thoughts and emotions and daily life all add to the recipe. Every day that recipe is slightly different, which is why your pain can change from one day to the next. The really encouraging part is that many of these factors can be changed. You might not be able to instantly change the arthritis in your knee, but you can improve your sleep, you can build your confidence, you can become stronger, manage your stress better, gradually increase your activity, and learn to understand pain more clearly. That's the real message behind the biopsychosocial model of pain. It doesn't ignore what's happening in your knee. It simply recognises that your knee is only one part of that story. This is one of the reasons why people with persistent knee pain can make such meaningful improvements even when changes on an X-ray or an MRI scan remain exactly the same. So, why does all of this matter? Because for many people living with ongoing knee pain, the hardest part isn't just the discomfort, it's the fear, the uncertainty, and the belief that something inside the knee is getting worse every time it hurts. But we've now seen that pain doesn't always mean damage. We've learned that your nervous system can become more protective and that pain is influenced by much more than just what's happening inside your knee. We've also seen that many of those influences can be changed. That's something incredibly important. You're not broken, you're not stuck, and you're certainly not beyond help. Once you understand how pain really works and what influences it, you can begin to take small, safe steps towards recovery. You'll feel less afraid of movement, more confident in your knee, and better equipped to make decisions that support recovery. Knowledge creates clarity, and clarity creates confidence. And confidence gives you the courage you need to keep moving forward. You don't need to be perfect to make progress, but the more you understand pain, the more power you have to take control of your recovery. Because once you understand why your knee hurts, you're no longer simply reacting to pain, you're learning to understand it. And that's where real recovery begins. Let's finish by bringing everything together. I really hope this presentation has given you a new way to think about your knee. Perhaps the biggest change is that you don't need to fear every painful movement. Pain is your body's way of trying to protect you, but it doesn't always mean you're causing damage. Learning to move with confidence again is a really important part of recovery. I also hope you can see that your knee isn't necessarily getting worse because it hurts. We've looked at how pain and tissue damage aren't always the same thing, and why it's possible for pain to change even when your scan doesn't. We've also talked about the fact that there are many things you can influence that affect your pain. Your strength, your movement, your sleep, your confidence, your stress levels, and your daily habits all play a big part. That means there are many positive steps you can take to help your recovery. Most importantly, I hope you leave knowing that recovery is possible, even if changes on an X-ray or MRI scan remain exactly the same. Your pain, your confidence, and your ability to do the things you enjoy can all improve. And finally, I hope you feel that you can move forward with confidence. Throughout the rest of the programme, we'll build on everything you've learned today. We'll combine education with a structured rehab programme to help you rebuild strength, movement, and function at your knee. My hope is that by the end of this programme, you'll not only have a stronger knee, but you'll also have the confidence and understanding to manage your symptoms long into the future, and understanding pain is the first step. Thanks for watching the video today. Every week I will be publishing a new video on a slightly different topic, all related to the knee. So if you found this helpful, feel free to subscribe so you don't miss future videos. Also in the links below, you'll find a link to my website where you can see the accompanying article for this video, and also where you'll find a link to subscribe to my weekly email, which is all about knee health. So I hope you've enjoyed this session today, and I'll look forward to seeing you next week for the next topic.